Khorne, the blood god, sits resplendent in his rage upon his brass throne, resting atop a mountain of bloody skulls, built from the countless heads of great champions his followers have slain over an immeasurable number of eons. No mortal man would be able to lay their eyes upon Khorne and survive, but various heretical writers have suggested that the blood god looks somewhat like one of his mighty bloodthirsty greater demons, only infinitely more terrifying. Khorne sits upon his throne, encased in his brass armor, capable of deflecting any blow, clutching his colossal sword that could carve continents into pieces, his eyes burning with endless fury in the center of his dog-like face. Khorne is said to have mighty forges and armories that run for leagues, belching sooty filth into the lightning-cracked air, yet he will forever favor this single combination of arms. His mighty throne room, built atop of his great brass tower, is supported by 8 gigantic brass pillars in honor of the sacred number of the blood god. The room itself is filled with his favored flesh-hounds, including the mighty Karanak, blessed with 3 heads and far more powerful than the rest of his kin. Some have described these loyal beasts as a bodyguard to Khorne, but to him they are but pets, as the blood god has never been bested in mortal combat and thus needs no protection. Even if another of the ruinous powers were to enter the brass tower, Khorne knows that he alone would prove triumphant. Such is his infinite strength and skill. The tower itself rises leagues into the blackened sky, surrounded by a moat of molten blood, filled with the screaming enemies of Khorne, whilst the blackened brass walls are filled with monstrous carvings that depict the endless rage of the occupant within. Khorne puts none of his will into any endeavor that does not cause bloodshed. His lands in the realm of chaos are barren, cracked and dry, save for the ceaseless rivers of blood fueled by endless combat. Throughout his realm, legions of warriors fling themselves into combat purely for the sake of battle. Khorne cares not from where blood flows and skulls are sacrificed, so long as it is done in his name. It is not uncommon to see the warriors and champions of Khorne fighting amongst themselves, dueling and battling to prove their skill in combat and rise higher in the eyes of their lord. Khorne disdains magic. To him, only bloodletting through physical combat is acceptable. None of his followers are permitted to be sorcerers, although some will carry magic-imbued weapons or armor in order to augment their killing ability. All of Khorne's demons are built to kill quickly and efficiently. Khorne is also the least subtle of the Chaos Gods. While the troops of the other ruinous powers may fall back to recover or bring other talents into play, the demons of Khorne always fight to the death, cursing their enemies, their mounds of sinewy muscle carving their last steps through the front lines. Khorne's demons continue to spill blood and claim skulls until the last roar of defiance and rage from their gaping maws has been silenced. Then their bodies, further sacrifices to the lord they served so faithfully, are crushed to dust and ash by the next wave of his blood-crazed troops, all along screaming endlessly, "Blood for the blood god! Skulls for the throne of Khorne!" as they pour into glorious combat. The ruinous powers often spend more time concerned with besting their rival gods than trying to implement their carefully crafted plans upon the old world. Khorne, however, has an understandably difficult relationship with the other powers. Khorne has such a different philosophy that the others find it difficult to understand him. The blood god loathes magic, and yet all of the other powers are wielders of powerful magic. This alone would mark Khorne aside from all of the other powers, but the conflicting desires and ideologies of Nurgle, Slaanesh, and Tzeentch are so opposed, it becomes clearer why these immense powers spend so much of their energies in conflict with each other. Nurgle is abhorrent to Khorne. The Lord of Decay sits and waits in his pestilence, and if it were his way, would wait for eons for his plans to come slowly to fruition. Nurgle is quite happy for his followers to avoid direct combat, instead allowing them to simply spread disease and plague. To Khorne, this approach does not have the honor of bloody combat. Khorne revels in direct action, and the passive approach of Nurgle is totally at odds with the Blood God's principles. The Plague Lord's followers often refer to their master as Father or Grandfather Nurgle, and truly see the pestilent mutations and diseases that rack their bodies as great blessings from a doting relative. Followers of Nurgle surrounded by flies are bloated, disease-ridden abominations that would make even a strong-stomached man empty the contents of it over the floor. However, to Nurgle, his followers have been improved by the mounds of rotting flesh and pustules covering their abhorrent bodies. Nurgle is a god who believes that his goals will be achieved through careful building and stewardship of his blessings, whereas Khorne only cares for destruction. Tzeentch delights in baiting Khorne. The Changer of Ways is the most confusing, subtle, and maddening of the ruinous powers. Khorne is not unintelligent, but he has no time for subtlety, and his rage consumes more complicated emotions. Tzeentch therefore plays tricks upon Khorne for his own amusement, which Khorne responds to in the only way he knows how: violence. The Changer of Ways is also the greatest source of magic amongst the Chaos Gods, and Khorne does not look kindly upon this fact. Tzeentch, in Khorne's estimation, is a coward cringing behind a wall of trickery and simple conjuring instead of having any real power. He is a weakling, sustained only by the Aether. If this source of power were to diminish, then Khorne would raise his forces and crush the home of the Changer of Ways, the impossible fortress. One might imagine that Slaanesh possesses the ideology closest to Khorne's. He is the Prince of Pleasure and of Pain, and while no one can deny that Khorne's legions cause unbelievable pain, Khorne does not actually aim to cause suffering. Indeed, of all the Chaos Gods, Slaanesh is the most diametrically opposed to Khorne. Slaanesh is a patron of the arts and loves aesthetically pleasing objects. His followers are brought in through their taste for decadent pleasures. Slaanesh seeks to inwardly draw his followers in, ingratiating them slowly, as their taste for pleasure or pain becomes harder to satiate, requiring more and more perverse acts in order to feel anything at all. Decadence begets perversion, which begets abomination and utter depravity. And it is this methodology that is alien to Khorne. The Blood God has no time for pleasure or eroticism. Indeed, all feelings are wasted except rage, hate, and vengeance. Slaanesh also corrupts people from within, building on their inner thoughts and desires. Khorne always builds from without, focusing on outer strength and power. Slaanesh would delight in a grotesquely obese follower, gorging himself upon expensive delicacies, but Khorne cares only for muscle and sinew, to give strength in battle. Khorne seeks to cause death. Slaanesh lets his followers enjoy life to the fullest, fulfilling their most perverse desires. These two gods are constantly at war with one another, each believing that they have the upper hand, or can soon gain it, in their endless struggle. It is the constant relief of the old world that the Chaos Gods have not united under their one common aim to destroy all existing civilizations. Khorne may not be the subtlest of the ruinous powers, but that is not to say that he does not have goals and ambitions to fulfill beyond seeing blood spilled in his name. His rage may be infinite and endless, his fury immutable, but Khorne has a savage intelligence, seeing the need to lay seeds for his destructive plans to pay off in the future. Khorne revels in a man who seeks glory. For an old world society, this leads frequently to feelings of anger at one's enemies and a need to see them dead. Others may turn over to the ruinous powers in order to have their ambitions fulfilled. Examples include the militiaman who simply dreams of having the strength to repel his foes in order to see his wife and young child again, or the aging knight who wishes the strength of his youth still coursed through his veins. At the same time, many despair at their fate, and whilst Khorne finds this pathetic, he may still bestow blessings upon these wretched souls. Sometimes there is no better servant than one who is picked up at the lowest ebb and given his wish. The hearts of this kind of man often burn most fiercely for Khorne. Some servants of Khorne come willingly, others are slowly drawn in. There is a fine line between justice and vengeance, and in seeking revenge, many people cannot control the nihilism and anger within themselves, which spills over into a fury that cannot be purged from their body. This leads them into direct exposure to the principles Khorne espouses, and far too often the wrath has so consumed the person that inevitably the blood god then consumes their very soul. For Khorne's orders to be imposed across the empire, he first requires anarchy. If the established order of Emperor Karl Franz, the Grand Theogenist and the Temple of Sigmar has been overthrown, the old world will be critically and permanently weakened. More and more it appears as if the old races, the dwarves, the elves, the Slann, no longer have the numbers to withhold the advances of chaos without relying on the relatively undeveloped but numerous humans. Anarchy itself gives special pleasure to Khorne in comparison to his rival gods, because in times of anarchy there is inevitable conflict, and when there is such widespread bloodshed, it is inevitable that skulls shall be lifted into the air by bawling, muscled warriors offering their sacrifice to the blood god. Khorne loves to see mindless destruction and violence. The looting, decay, and devastation that come with the fall of organized society all feed his lust for wanton destruction. Khorne is not associated with subterfuge, but from his brass tower, the will that he imposes upon his followers has been confused by many a man. In the heat of a raging battle, warriors call upon their gods for strength, but it may not always be the guiding hand of Ulrich or Sigmar that answers the mortal men who petition the deities, but the blood god. Equally, cultists of Khorne can occasionally show a modicum of patience and foresight compared to their patron. Throughout the empire, cults such as the Crimson Skull, the Flayed Blood, and the Wrath of Khorne scheme and plan. These sects secretly turn the minds and souls of warriors into mindless minions of Khorne. Often soft-minded warriors are their target, lured into a group they initially believe worships Sigmar or Ulrich. All of the ruinous powers strive to achieve dominion over the world, and the life that crawls about its daily drudgery has no concept of the beings of pure power that inhabit the realm of chaos. Khorne, however, strives for more than simple control. He looks for utter dominance. This is a trait often found in his followers, as they have been known, even in battle, to turn upon each other, dueling till the death. For aspiring warriors of Khorne, There is no goal, no feat that is more desirable than inflicting utter defeat upon a champion of the Blood God, and Khorne actively encourages this attitude amongst his followers. Khorne is not a being that any mortal can claim to have ever seen, yet his very name inspires fear. Those unlucky enough to have set eyes upon his demons will no doubt suffer nightmares until their dying day, and know that their very survival was a miracle, even if the mental scars remain. Those that have faced his warriors in battle know of the frenzy, the bloodlust, and the almighty strength and power that lets these brutes carry on, even after receiving what would be a mortal wound to an average man. And the stories of these battles inspire fear in the citizens of the cities, towns, and villages across the Empire, and across the old world. And Khorne can profit from fear. Whole battalions of elite troops have been known to turn tail and attempt to escape from his demonic hordes, but this inevitably leads to their slaughter. Sometimes this fear can even attract followers. Some can no longer see the influence of Sigmar, Tal, Shalia, Raya, or any of the imperial gods upon the land, but they have witnessed the ravening power of the Chaos gods, thus believing that the world as they know it must be nearing an end. This kind of person seeks to worship chaos in an attempt to save their soul when the inevitable end arrives. Merely by his reputation and the furious rage of his servants in battle mimicking the personality of their liege means that Khorne has become a far more dangerous and powerful foe, and he seeks to spread fear throughout the old world. Khorne requires blood. Khorne requires skulls. Khorne requires violence, destruction, and utter subservience to this cause. His blessings are not a sign of kindness, love, devotion, or even care. They are a means to an end, designed to increase the efficiency of his killing machines, driving them on to greater acts of ferocity. If Khorne does not care about the lives of his minions, the minions themselves seem to care even less. The hate that fills them eventually dominates their every thought. Driven onwards in battle, Khorne's followers eagerly sacrifice themselves to the blade, and retreat is never an option. The Blood God himself sits impassively. He simply seeks out destruction and bloodshed and cares not from where it comes. His indifference does, however, mean that Khorne is always in need of new champions. There is a dual purpose to this need. When a warrior falls, a new one is needed to step into the breach, to take his place so that Khorne can gain the upper hand in his struggle against the other ruinous powers. Secondly, fresh blood can test his existing champions. If they meet in a challenge, then Khorne can only benefit. If the existing champion emerges victorious, then he will have learned something from the warrior he has just defeated, increasing his already impressive skills with his chosen weaponry. If the challenger walks away alive from the combat, then the defeated warrior was a weakling and unfit to serve Khorne. His body will make a meager sacrifice, but no more. Through this brutal and bloody system, Khorne slowly builds up the strength and power of his forces, waiting for the moment he can unleash them upon the unknowing world. Khorne does have more minor plans than defeating his rival gods and destroying civilization, however. Khorne realizes that it is unlikely that the world will fall in one swift motion, and so he looks to build his influence, spreading destruction, anarchy, and death wherever possible. The Blood God's marauders and warriors look to test the boundaries of the Empire and Kislev, probing for weaknesses and identifying suitable invasion points. These raids gradually weaken the defenses of the two nations, which take time to rebuild, whereas Khorne has an endless supply of eager warriors. The greatest of Khorne's servants sometimes ascend to demonhood, while some will not have the physical or mental strength to accept such an abundance of gifts. Devolving into mindless, gibbering chaos spawn, others will gradually take on a more impressive stature, growing free of their mortal shackles. For instance, the mortal body of Valkia the Bloody, consort of Khorne, has been almost totally transformed. Her upper body has grown horns and wings, while her lower torso resembles that of a bloodletter more than that of a woman. Whatever gifts are bestowed, those with the mark of Khorne look to seek out and challenge others worthy of combat, especially other devoted Khorne worshippers. The blood god favors those who sacrifice friends, allies, and enemies alike to him, and there is no greater trial than to destroy another Khorne warrior in mortal combat. Any beast of chaos can be gifted with the mark of Khorne, a symbol of the god's blessing, although this special gift is most often given to the strongest and most ferocious among them. Additionally, Khorne can also bestow his gift upon certain chosen warriors and marauders. These mighty warriors are filled with a mere portion of Khorne's rage, and yet it propels them into battle like they have been possessed. Warriors bearing the mark of Khorne are more muscle than their comrades, and have some other outward sign of the blessing they have received, such as red eyes, tears of blood, or great brands burned into their chests and arms. The gifts are as follows: Gift of arms, a weapon of the blood god. The gift of beasts, beasts or servants to aid his chosen. Gift of flesh, mutation that grants strength and ferocity. A gift of will, unbreakable willpower and bloodlust. The gift of title, granted a demonic name, chosen to one day ascend demonhood. Khorne draws fewer true cultists than the other chaos gods. Tzeentch can provide great magical prowess. Slaanesh can bestow gifts of intense pleasure or pain, and Nurgle can provide mastery over plague and disease. Certain groups are often attracted to one of the chaos gods in particular. Acolytes, hedge wizards, and sorcerers may be drawn to Tzeentch, doctors, alchemists, and barber surgeons to Nurgle, the wealthy and pleasure-seekers to Slaanesh, and warriors to Khorne. Khorne provides less subtle gifts than the other three, and the strength and power that he can bequeath make him an obvious temptation for warriors. Of course, many of his followers do not realize the true corrupting power of chaos and have no idea that eventually they will be fully consumed by the gift of rage that the blood god provides. Some people can resist longer than others, but weaker minds are quickly overcome by the strength writhing within them and become mindless killing machines. The weakest succumb to the realm of chaos completely, warping into a mere parody of their former selves as slavering chaos spawn. If a warrior pleases Khorne, he has been known to continue to bless his chosen so he might better carry out the will of the blood god. While one cultist in a million may eventually step upon the path to becoming a demon prince, the rest will, at some point, have their bodies fail to accept the changes thrust upon them. Skylar Anfingrim was once one of Khorne's greatest champions, a warrior of immense strength hailing from the northern wastes. He killed by the thousand and received many rewards from Khorne until, at last, his wasted body collapsed and transformed into a spawn. Although Skylar still curries the favor of Khorne, unlike other Chaos spawn, he is now fated to forever walk across the blasted snowy wasteland, consuming all that he encounters. Khorne's power to transform and recreate flesh should not be underestimated, as the story of his consort, Valkyr the Bloody, demonstrates. Once a great warrior queen of the north, Khorne looked upon her with something almost approaching fondness, until she perished in battle. Racked with a rage that could have carved nations in two, Khorne set about rebuilding Valkyr's broken body. He raised her from death and made her part demon prince, so that she would never fall again. Her body now sprouts great leathery wings, and from her forehead burst forth two massive horns, adding to her already considerable might. She now stays with her lord, master, and consort, often commanding his armies within the realm of chaos. The day she flies against mankind will be a day untold thousands breathe their final breath. Such is the power Khorne has infused in her. Over the centuries, raiders from above the Sea of Claws have always targeted Kislev and the northernmost provinces of the Empire. These raids have become increasingly brutal and deadly as the taint of chaos spreads across the northern wastes. In times gone by, these battle-hardened marauders and Kurgan forcibly settled in the areas they targeted for pillaging and claimed a local wife. Over time, as the grip of the ruinous powers upon the world increased, their strength in the Northlands had grown exponentially. The taint of chaos is ever increasing, and has always been stronger in the north, due to the close proximity of the gateway into the realm of chaos. For this reason, the hard warriors of the north have always worshipped the chaos gods, even if the names of these gods have been warped along with the minds of the Norskans, Kurgan, and other tribes that periodically launch raids on the civilized settlements to the south. While all tribes recognize the chaos gods as their masters, they may pray and shout to a different name, but it is always Khorne, or one of the other ruinous powers, that is listening and responding to their cries. Thus the raids from the north not only seek to find women, food, and gold for the sake of survival, but also blood for the blood god. When the fur-cloaked warriors emerge from their longships onto the beaches, their aim may not be to pillage, but to kill, maim, and destroy in the name of Khorne, or one of the other chaos gods. The Northlands are a savage wasteland. Few who choose to live there have any ambition other than to become a great warrior and face the judgment of their god by traveling to the far north. Those few that return often come back bearing a great scar, brand, or tattoo, a mark of the favor they have received by becoming a chosen servant of their deity. Faith and honor have been wiped from the mindset of these people, thrown away for a craving for the blessings of the dark powers. Most of the livestock brought back from raids is sacrificed, and any weaklings found among them are thrown onto the same pyres. The tribes are in a state of constant strife, both with each other and with the lands to the south. In Kislev, where the border is less constant than the sea, the Ice Queen has been forced to reinforce the defences of Prague and Erengrad against the increasing ferocity of Norscan attacks. Despite the greater quantity of attacks, the only facet of society remaining is loyalty to kin. Few dare to displease their family elders, for to do so will lead to being cast out into the wilds, with little chance of being accepted by other tribes. The old world is a grim and dark place for all of its inhabitants. It is a bloody and violent continent, from the Kurgan and marauders in the north to scimitar-wielding troops from Araby in the south. The human inhabitants of these lands, despite thinking themselves civilized, are just as brutal as some of these so-called lesser races. The Empire may be the greatest of these nations in terms of raw power, but its citizenry is also the most ripe to be turned to the causes of chaos. Even so, the Empire has warred at times with all of its neighbors, spilling the precious blood of men rather than focusing on the far greater threat posed by chaos. Surrounded by enemies, the Empire must also guard against attacks from orcs, goblins, the undead, beastmen, skaven, and ogres. Not a day in the old world passes without conflict and bloodshed. From the snow-filled north to the wastes and deserts of the south, thousands lose their lives each day as the engines of war march ever onwards. Peace rarely lasts long. Men are ambitious and too willing to break treaties. Bestial creatures retreat only to gather their strength for renewed assaults. Magical entities are summoned, both by accident and design, into the world to wreak havoc. The constant strife brings what might be described as pleasure to Khorne. The blood god cares not for pleasure, leaving such ridiculous emotions to the hated Slaanesh, and feels only rage and hate. But the destruction energizes him, feeding his hate. He then uses that energy to incite greater acts of murder from his followers. The Chaos Gods find that the Beastmen make useful minions. The cloven monstrosities are born of chaos, yet unlike demons, they have all been birthed in the forests, and so can wander freely, unlike some of Khorne's followers who require some proximity to the realm of chaos in order to be sustained. A warped parody of man and beast, Khorne finds the Beastmen's brutality pleasing. Filled with a loathing for man that has only increased with time, these creatures live to hunt and kill human flesh. Khorne knows that these beasts will continue their quest forever, and, like the other ruinous powers, rarely concentrates on such lowly creatures. Beastmen serve chaos regardless, neither comprehending the power of their foul deities nor realizing their part in the plans of the four gods. Inside the Drakvald and other forests, the uncounted herds build herdstones to worship the ruinous powers, bleating obscene cries as prayers. Sometimes Khorne or one of the other ruinous powers will take a particular interest in a single beastman. It will be little more than a disposable pawn, but some beastmen have been known to receive blessings and mutations specific to one of the ruinous powers, though this is not common. Beastmen are already ferocious warriors that are fast, agile, tough-skinned, and fully capable of delivering crunching blows with their crude and rusty weaponry. Khorne enjoys that the beastmen are built for battle, whether it is the lowest Ungor or the greatest Doom Bull. The destruction caused by the cloven race can only further his cause. The demons of Khorne are much like their god, raging, bloodthirsty, and incomparably deadly. Even the least of their number is a truly terrible foe. Whether this is down to their being skilled warriors, raging beasts, or even both, it is a terrible fate for a mortal man to face a demon in battle, and it is even more so when the demon is of Khorne's vile pantheon, for their overriding purpose as dealers of violent death is only all too obvious. The demons of Khorne are their god in microcosm, unrelenting embodiments of fury and bloodthirsty martial honor. They are the most physically powerful and single-mindedly vicious of all demonic creatures. Despite being creatures fundamentally of arcane origins, as all demons are, the creatures of Khorne utilize no sorcery, keeping in with the blood god's teachings of martial honor. Most, if not all of them, also possess an impressive resistance to assaults of arcane nature. They are beyond any bargaining, and are possessed of the keen martial intellects to rival those of great generals and cunning huntsmen, and bear colossal martial prides that do not easily suffer wounding.